Welcome to On the Brink. My name is Sean Judge. Today I'm joined by Geetha Panchapakesan, CEO and founder of Tesser. We recently announced we led a $4.5 million seed round of financing into Tesser alongside Strobe, Anthemis, and Digital Currency Group. Panchapakesan has spent nearly 20 years in payments across MasterCard, PayPal, MoneyGram, Fiserv, Visa, and most recently Circle. She's now helping enable financial institutions to utilize stablecoins. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Geetha Panchapakesan.
Matt Walsh and Nick Carter are partners at Castle Island Ventures. All views expressed by them or the guests on this podcast are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Castle Island Ventures. Guests and hosts may maintain positions in the assets discussed in this podcast. You should not treat any opinion expressed by anyone on this podcast as a specific inducement to make a particular investment or follow a particular strategy, but only as an expression of their personal opinion. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
Brought down by bad mortgage investments, Lehman, which has 25,000 employees, will be liquidated.
The federal government loans American International Group, AIG, $85 billion.
This is a different kind of market, and the Fed is asleep.
The federal government is stepping in to stabilize Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the two mortgage giants that have been threatened by the housing crisis.
The Bank of England has pumped £75 billion more into Britain's ailing economy with a new round of quantitative easing.
You print a couple $1 trillion, and all of a sudden, people start to worry. So out of this worry, we have something called the Bitcoin.
Welcome to On the Brink. My name is Sean Judge. Today, I'm sitting down with Geetha Panchapakesan. Geetha, welcome to On the Brink.
Thank you so much, Sean. And you did my name very well. I'm impressed.
Worked on it. Just to start, Geetha, if you could just share your personal background and how you arrived at working in crypto.
Absolutely. I landed in payments with a job at MasterCard, no particular reason. And then tried a few things, meandered a bit, landed at MoneyGram, did cross-border payments, loved it, and then meandered a little bit more. And from MoneyGram to doing stablecoins for cross-border payments, just eventual thing that had to happen. So here I am.
That's great. And within payments, what is it specifically about payments that interests you?
It's going to sound cliched, but it's the reality of it, the usefulness of it. It's something that everyone has to do. And especially when I started doing cross-border payments, regular payments, paying for goods and services can be a little boring. But when you start sending money overseas, and it feels like much more real value to it. Definitely something that I appreciated a lot. Little anecdote was that while I was at MoneyGram, I set up US to Philippines, US to Mexico, and then I set up US to India, and then I sent money to my in-laws. I was like, oh, this is real. Like I'm actually using it. So there's something very, very real about it.
That's great. And so you've obviously worked at a number of large payments companies before arriving at Circle. What major shifts have you seen occur in payments before even stablecoins?
That's a very good question. There's a lot, right? But if I were to step back and say, what are the big things? Domestic real-time payments with governments actually stepping in to push that within their countries. I think that's a big one. The UPI I think is about 10 years old in India. PIX is, I think, closer to 5 years old. PIX in Brazil. But I think real-time payments generally has become pretty popular, pretty big, pretty important. I think the other thing you see is a lot of this open banking, API-based payments, like account-to-account payments, that whole thing. I'm clubbing into one big thing, but going beyond card to make payments, it's still more popular in markets where card is not that prevalent, but it has become a big trend. Plaid exists because of that, for example. The other interesting thing is wallets, which were primarily payment methods. In a lot of the rest of the world, wallets are used for lending. So you can actually, from your wallet, I think Paytm does it, Alipay does it, all these super apps, you can do loans from your wallet, insurance from your wallet, investing from your wallet, which even I think Revolut offers. So I think the wallet becoming a gateway to overall financial services has actually been very, very interesting to see.
Well, makes a lot of sense. And then diving into Tesser, you started Tesser earlier this year. We were thrilled to lead the seed round there. What is the high-level overview of Tesser?
Tesser was built basically to enable traditional financial institutions to access blockchain in a very simple and easy manner. Traditional financial institutions, which we define as banks, PSPs, MSBs, they move trillions of dollars today, but they don't move it very efficiently. And we now have a very efficient way to move value. Why not TradFi, an easy way to get access to that? So basically, Tesser was created as a one-stop shop, simple white label technology solution for traditional financial institutions.
And was there a specific moment before or at Circle that shaped your conviction in the space around stablecoins?
It's the journey. Having been in cross-border for so long, it's very much at MoneyGram, spending 6 months with my partner in the Philippines, who was a bank, trying to figure out how much money we need to keep there and if they will give us any interest and what will we do if the money runs out. It was so painful. And the fact that there's constant tracking of the working capital that's sitting in these places, I used to come running to my treasury guy and go, we've run out. Can you please move some more money instantly? All of that, by the time I got to Circle, I was like, this makes sense.
And so where are those legacy payments companies today as it relates to stablecoin strategies? You see a lot of headlines. Are people really engaging with these things? Where are they in their journey into being able to send stablecoins?
They're all over the place is a simple answer. Even when I was at Circle, I think 2 to 3 years ago, some of the big ones like WorldPay, Visa, Stripe, all these guys started actively looking at stablecoins and using it. So there's some PSPs who got into the game early, specifically PSPs, a few banks, but primarily PSPs. But then ever since the Stripe Bridge announcement, it's really accelerated. A lot of the PSPs have tried to get in, they're doing partnerships, they're trying to figure out what makes sense. Banks have been a lot more cautious because they are much more cautious about regulatory impact on them. So they have been much more cautious. Although, like Standard Chartered got into the game early. And even now banks are like, okay, I will maybe provide a way to invest in digital assets. I'm not exactly sure what to do with stablecoins, but they know they need a stablecoin strategy. So they're all working on that. There's still some that need a stablecoin 101. So it is all over the place.
On Tesser, if financial institution wants to have the alternative to send stablecoins, what infrastructure is lacking today for them to do that? Or said differently, what is Tesser building to enable this as an option?
Truthfully, the infrastructure exists, but it's very fragmented. So it's all over the place. If you have to go understand what custody options you have, what makes sense for you, and then you have to figure out what providers to use if they can actually do exactly what you need to do, especially when you're a regulated FI. Then you have to figure out where do you go for on-ramp, and then which token should I use? Which chain should I use? Wait, there's this new chain. Should I use that? What exactly should I do? And then what is gas? There's all that stuff. And then at the end of the day, we bring all of that together in one package solution where they can plug in and go and be able to offer stablecoin payments, either as offering it to their customers as an option or even using the rails in more efficient ways to find a new revenue opportunity. Lots of new things that they haven't thought about. We're able to bring it to them in one piece. It would take them upwards of 12 months to build this. They can build it with us in like 2 to 4 weeks. At the end of it, they do payments on behalf of others, right? So they have to account for every cent. So we do all of the reconciliation, the reporting, the cleanup, all of that for them, which makes it a lot easier. So technically, from an infrastructure perspective, yeah, things exist, but it's difficult.
It sounds like these financial institutions are a little bit all over the map, to your point, in terms of where they are in their stablecoin journey. But what is your view in these conversations on how stablecoins will benefit a financial institution?
I mean, so many ways. A lot of what we are seeing people realize is that settlement as a use case is a very big one. Banks have grown up on this nostro vostro concept. So they have accounts everywhere, friends in other banks, they hold funds in all of these banks. It's a painful thing to manage. Treasury across multiple currencies, multiple banking partners. When you can settle with a bearer instrument where once the value is transferred, it's yours. You don't need to hold value there in order to have it ready to be transferred, but you can transfer it at a moment's notice. And the value now has actually been transferred. That is an incredible innovation. So for a lot of these banks that move money, they don't need to do this anymore. They don't need to hold funds with other banks anymore. They can instantly move value with stablecoins. That to me is fundamental, like an operational efficiency in leaps and bounds. Is also, by the way, a lot of the dollar accounts, we talk about dollar accounts in like Argentina and places where there's volatility, but I don't know if you noticed, Wise announced recently they were hiring a new person. It was all over the news. And they're hiring somebody to actually look at what specifically the digital holding strategy is. How do you actually provide capability to their customers to hold funds in dollars? And that's basically what people are saying is that de-dollarization notwithstanding, there's actually a lot of demand for holding dollars globally. And this is a very simple and easy way to do it.
And just thinking about starting Tesser a few years ago versus right now, you mentioned It feels Stripe's acquisition of Bridge was the starting gun for a lot of traditional Web2 companies, as well as just financial institutions broadly saying, hey, we should start to look at this stablecoin space. But I think more importantly, recently with regulatory clarity, how has the Genius Act shifted conversations you're having with banks and fintechs?
That's an interesting question because the Genius Act is focused on the issuance, right? It's not really focused on how does a bank account for stablecoins and what can they lend against it and how does it look on the balance sheet. It doesn't say any of those things. It basically says these are the rules. If you want to be an issuer, you have to be, I think it's called a PPSI, but these are the rules if you want to issue a stablecoin. That being said, mere fact of the existence of the Genius Act has actually opened up a lot of doors because people are like, oh, okay, so it's not a bad thing. We can actually engage with it in some way. It's legal, exactly. We can engage with it in some way. So I think that has been extremely helpful. And needless to say, the US sets the standard. So although MiCA in Europe has been around for a while and it's much more comprehensive, it's not focused on issuance. Once the Genius Act has happened, other countries are also at least willing to engage and talk about it, although they're probably a lot slower.
There's been a tremendous amount of infrastructure that's been built over the last 5 years or so that have made it easier for individuals to hold and send digital assets. What other infrastructure could you enable today that wasn't maybe quite built a few years ago? There's a bunch of tooling underneath Tesser.
The way I think about it is there are 2 or 3 different kind of broad areas. From pure like tech perspective, I don't think you could do payments on, Ethereum 5 years ago. What was it, like 15 transactions a second, some ridiculously small number. It was very expensive. But that has significantly become better. The chains are able to compete with Visas like 65,000 transactions per second. You have layer 2s that can actually do that. I think that's a big step forward because you can actually take this to a bank that does payments or a PSP that does payments and say, this is very similar. You can get the same kind of throughput you used to get with other payment methods. From a technology front, there are some of those things like custody infrastructure also, whereas you had BitGo anchorage, which were meant for large holders where it's not easy to move in and out. You need to look at something and people are starting to actually shift towards more of a payments-based custody options, which are also secure and tight. So I think from a technology perspective, those things are there. There's then the ecosystem. There's on and off ramps have continued to grow. Without that, you couldn't do anything in payments. So I wouldn't have been able to take this to a bank and say, hey, look, we can build you an ecosystem. We can connect you to the ecosystem because it's there, it exists. So that's been a big shift. But honestly, I think it's the maturation of the space overall has been why Tesser, we're doing this at the right time. It's the Visas of the world that push to say, well, we're going to do this. We're going to be an early adopter. It's the regulations. It's the fact that regulations have been enforced on exchanges and other crypto-based FIs so that there's now trust in that as well, that they're responsible for AML. At the end, they have AML obligations. They have KYC, KYB obligations. All of those things have brought in a certain amount of trust into the ecosystem. So I am able to build Tesser for this specific audience only now because of all these things that have actually happened.
Right. And I guess with the Tesser product, what does the product look like today for businesses looking to move money? And you touched a little bit on some of the reconciliation and reporting piece. So what are some of the core aspects of the product that really stand out for FIs as they evaluate other providers in the space and other ways to engage with stablecoins?
Absolutely. The MVP, by the way, is going out tomorrow. And the core platform, the MVP actually does cover most of the plan for the core platform. The core platform it's a packaged end-to-end for the FI. FIs today are talking to payments networks, other access to stablecoin infrastructure, but they don't really have the pieces that need to plug in, number one. So we provide the custody infrastructure, which the plan is to have multiple options, depending on the kind of FI you are, depending on the specific needs you have. It could be a custodial option, an MPC wallet. So based on what it is that you're looking for, we have different options. Starting from that, we can plug you in with the right on-ramp providers, depending on your geo, depending on your risk appetite, etc. And then there is all of the treasury management, the gas management. We are plugged into multiple chains. We offer multiple tokens today. The MVP is USDC and USDT, but eventually We plan to add a lot more. So all of that you have access to immediately. And we're managing your treasury for you in the sense that today the MVP is all about tracking your balances based on, okay, you're sending money to Nigeria. Yesterday, the rate was one thing. Today, the rate is another. You may not have enough money to match that. So we make sure that your treasury is ready to make the payments for your day. We are obviously doing the payments. The payments are almost the BAU piece of it, like everybody's doing the payments. So we are plugged in to the right off-ramp providers. So we're enabling the payments. We're executing on the payments. But then, like you said, the important piece is the reconciliation, because we ensure, again, for you as a service provider to others, as an FI, we ensure that we get you all of the data that you need in your transaction so you can tick and tie everything at the end of it. That's basically the end-to-end of what we provide. And I'm fairly confident there's nobody else that provides this out there in this particular form for an FI. It'll provide bits and pieces. Again, I think it's fragmented. You can use other service providers who have their own regulatory framework and operational framework. But if you want to build this within your own framework and do it quickly, this is the best way for you to do it.
It's amazing. And as you're building Tesser, if you could fast forward one regulatory or technical development, what would that be today?
Honestly, even though I was saying regulations would move forward, the truth of the matter is banks, especially banks, are still a little skittish about, okay, I don't know if I can hold stables. Can you find me a way in which somebody can hold it on my behalf? And that's primarily because in a lot of jurisdictions, including the US, you don't exactly know what it means to hold stables. In a lot of the jurisdictions in LATAM, for example, stables are neither a good or a bad. It's just gray. When it's gray, you're like, what happens if they come knocking on my door and I don't really have an answer? I wish that would accelerate. I think it's going to. I wish it would accelerate a lot faster than it does.
Well, this is great. We invested earlier this year. What are some of the kind of key hires that you need to get going on here in the next year or so?
We've done a kind of an initial hire already. We've got very deep product people. We've got BD people. Needless to say, we've got our key engineers. We are going to probably hire some folks on the operational side once our design partners get up and running. We'll continue to build out the engineering team, although the engineering team is trying to see how much they can use AI to keep it tight. And then we'll see. We'll see what else we need as we go. But we're now 5.5 or 6 people. 5.5 because one of them is actually part of them.
Well, congrats on the launch at Money 2020. And I'm sure people will be excited to see that next week. In the meantime, where can people learn more about Tesser?
Yeah, for sure. If you're at Money 2020, please come see us at booth SU13, which is the startup area. But otherwise, Tesser.xyz, of course. And in that, by the way, if you go down to the bottom, you can actually reach out to the team and get a meeting going. So do that if you want to talk to us. There's a link to our calendars. You can find us all on LinkedIn, and we've all posted at various times. So you'll be able to look up Tesser on LinkedIn and be able to find the people that work there and reach out to any of us on LinkedIn as well. So those are some good places to start.
Great. Well, Geetha, thanks so much for joining us today. Super excited to be partnered with you and the team at Tesser.
Awesome. No, thank you so much. Really appreciate Castle Island for believing in us, trusting in us, and getting us up and going. So yeah, we'll do this journey together.
Awesome. Look forward to having you on in a couple of years.
Thank you so much.
To talk about all the big financial institutions that are using Tesser.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome.
Thanks, Geetha.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of On the Brink with Castle Island. To learn more about Castle Island, visit castleisland.vc. And to listen to all of our podcast episodes, please visit castleisland.vc/podcast or just click on the tab on our website. Thanks for listening.